Greetings once again, everybody, and welcome back to another Conversations with Amoda Maa podcast. It has been quite a long time, and we've been very busy with retreats and reorganization in so many ways of the foundation that we just haven't had a chance to do a podcast, even though the longing and the yearning and the desire is great. So here we are, we finally managed to get some time, and I'm going to be exploring a deeply important spiritual matter and human matter with Amoda Maa. But first of all, I think I'm going to say hello to her. Hello, Amoda.
Hello, Kavi.
So let me see how we're going to get into this. At some point, I think, certainly in our experience, at some point on the deep spiritual path of inquiry, we have to, and inevitably do, meet aloneness, our aloneness. And that aloneness is a doorway, brings up a million things. It's actually a portal to something that we're hopefully going to explore and unpack a little bit. But that's on the spiritual path. And there's a greater context in many ways because there's a cultural paradigm, if you like, that this seeking, that this avoidance kind of sits in. And that is the great fear of loneliness. So we're going to be talking in some ways about loneliness to aloneness and what it means to stop turning away from the fear of our loneliness. I think I don't know, from what I've seen around, there are people, there are commentators, there are very wise people who are talking about the devastating consequences, both in the physical body, the emotional body, the spiritual body, and in the culture itself, of our fear of being alone, but our recognition in a certain way that we are alone. But that aloneness is not embraced, so actually it just leads to a great feeling of isolation, a great feeling of separation. Separation is one of the key things that is talked about in culture in many ways, the deeper you go, but also in the deepest spiritual inquiry. So this conversation is somehow going to open up what it means to shift from this great terror or feeling of loneliness. We're not really going to explore the physical manifestations, but there are physical manifestations. But we're going to see if we can open this up with Amoda to really kind of get to a deeper exploration of it. So having said that, try to introduce it in a certain way. I'm going to read a piece that I think actually, Amoda, this might be from a new book that's in the pipeline that's coming
right.
to fruition in the garden of the Amoda Maa Teaching Foundation. Is this correct?
This is correct, yes.
Can we see when this is likely due? Is it this year, next year, or?
I would estimate that it's this year.
Excellent. Do we have a working title, or is that secret?
No, we can say it's called The Way of Openness.
So very much reflective of the current iteration of the teaching.
Yes.
Let me read this section then, and then we'll dive in. The spiritual search is nothing other than the longing to come home, to die into the open space of now. We yearn for the void, and yet we fear it. The longing for relationship, like so many other longings, is at its core an attempt to fill the void of beingness. We fill this void with countless activities. Some are harmless, others less so. but both stem from the same impulse to avoid the raw, singular aloneness of being. When the discomfort of solitude arises, we instinctively seek distraction. We fill the space with activity, pottering around the house, picking up the phone, making another cup of tea, keeping busy with chores, anything to avoid stillness. These distractions may be harmless, but when the discomfort runs deeper, we may reach for more harmful escapes: another drink, another cigarette, another dose of stimulation. In doing so, we become trapped in a cycle of numbing and seeking, always moving, always running from the void. Yet this very aloneness we flee from is the doorway to something profoundly alive. What we resist in solitude holds the key to liberation. In turning toward the void rather than away, we discover its hidden vitality. Death is the doorway to rebirth, to the unfiltered aliveness of now. How do we discover this aliveness? By turning softly toward the void instead of running away. By resting deeply in silence, in solitude, in the empty vastness of being. Sometimes reading your words out, I don't really want to kind of continue speaking, because they speak into the essence of us. They speak into the void of us. They actually have this capacity to bring us into the very aloneness or depth that we point to, that you point to. But we are on a podcast, so I think silence won't really work. So let's somehow open this up. I'm going to hand to you to see where you want to, how that stirs in you, Amoda.
Mm. I think first of all, I should say that this void of being that's being offered as an invitation to true aliveness and wholeness and freedom is not necessarily about the outer situation, in the sense of renouncing the world or renouncing our lives and living in, as a hermit. That's not necessarily necessary. So that's not really what's being spoken about. It's more of an inner solitude or inner singularity. We could say that void of being reveals itself when we stop following the movement of mind. The movement of mind that's always seeking something more, seeking fulfillment in something, usually an object or something that we can have or something that we can do. So there is an external activity, but it's always seeking something. And that seeking of something is the avoidance of the void of being. It's seeking to fill that void of being. So the distractions that you just read out, whether they're simple distractions of the everyday activity, and not all of that is a distraction, but very often when it's unexamined, a lot of it is a moving away from this moment, from the emptiness of just this, and the compulsion of that, or whether it's something a more harmful, if you like, addictive cycle, which could be the seeking of relationship over and over again, the seeking of stimulants over and over again, something to fill that emptiness of, at the core, that many people have not really allowed themselves to meet in themselves. So it's a very sort of often unconscious moving away from that and then trying to fill it up so that it's not met in the intimacy of one's inner self. It's that's really being offered as a doorway. And sometimes that may include or necessitate not filling up our days or lives with endless activity, and just being with oneself. But it's not really so much the external, but the internal relationship. So I just wanted to say that first. So it's not about necessarily, living as a hermit. It's not at all. But it is taking the opportunity or the space to be with oneself, because that constant moving away doesn't allow us to. Well, there's a number of layers for this.
Oh yes, there are many. I know.
On a more surface layer or immediate layer, the first layer, if you like, which is necessary, is simply the avoidance of feelings. And usually that feeling is one of discomfort or vulnerability or, loss or some kind of, we could say, heartbreak, some kind of tenderness in the heart. And for many people, that's a scary proposition. And so much of life is spent avoiding that. So that's a kind of top layer, if you like, or first layer, is to allow feelings which become emotions, which then become stored in the body as tension, as perhaps anxiety, as stress, as a certain agitation of the nervous system, and eventually as disease. It allows us to be with those feelings, so far from them being feelings or emotions or energies that harm us. They're actually the doorway into true healing and wholeness. And for many people, including spiritual seekers who have experienced what we might call trauma or hurt of some kind, which every human being has experienced to some degree, that's the first avoidance. So the invitation is to be still inside and to allow those, let's call them feelings, emotions, energies, to fully be met, to fully be allowed. And that's the first port of healing, if you like, but also allows us to go even deeper than that. Because underneath all that is the core wound of separation. Yeah, the belief, the sense that I'm a separate self.
Yes.
And that's very much avoided. Yeah.
Well, because the core of your teaching, of our teaching, is predominantly about the second one. That's where the really are work is, if you like. And yes, you do have to consider and speak to the what we call the surface level. There are no levels in that sense, but it's that the surface level discomforts that you're talking about are not separate from and point themselves. They're the very pointers to the next level down, which is that we have been culturally, societally, conditioned in a way to into this world with a fundamental belief that we are alone and separate, and that's a very bad thing. We cannot handle that, and so everybody runs away from it. The culture is about running away from that, and in that there is a terrible impact of that. So I just wanted to say that so that that can lead into this that you're talking about, which is the second layer or the deepest layer, let's call it, which is the existential
Yes.
fear of aloneness. So let just go to that.
Yes, that's right. It's an existential layer, if you like, not a circumstantial layer. It's not about the circumstances of your life,
Yes.
although the surface layer, the first layer, shall we call it, the top layer, is usually about events that have happened, things that have happened where you've been let down, where you've
Yes, very good.
where you've been hurt. But so once that has been met, then the possibility of the existential layer revealing itself, and that's where the real doorway is. And again, for those who are on a spiritual path, that's the layer that usually will come up. There'll be a sense of it, and the fear of meeting that is the same, and the avoidance of that is the same as any other layer, if you like, which is ultimately the fear of death, in the sense of the death of the self construct, the construct of me as a body, a mind, a separate entity, which gives us some sense of temporary, if you like, solidity or security, but ultimately has no security in it, because this body mind will eventually die. So the fear of that, the fear of meeting what is imagined as a void, the void of nothingness, that I don't exist, is the if you like, preventative to just relaxing into it. Relaxing into it, because that's what the invitation is. So what usually comes up at the edge of that layer is a sense of abandonment. And again, not circumstantial abandonment, but existential abandonment, that somehow I've been abandoned by God, by life, by existence, that I exist separate to that, and therefore I have to fight for my survival. I have to fight for love. I have to fight for, I have to prove my worthiness, because ultimately the core wound is one of unworthiness. And this is really the core wound of existential separation, which is illusory, but seems very real, whilst we identify with mind, body, and my life, me and my life, and me as a independent self, a separate self. And so that's the invitation, it's the invitation of meditation, it's the invitation of inquiry, so a spiritual inquiry, and it's the invitation of deep relaxation into just this. So that is the not following the movement of mind that wants to grasp the next moment, the next thought, the next whatever it is that it's seeking as a sense of security, to just stop. And that's a very intimate and internal invitation right here, just stop, relaxes the agitated mind, even though you don't know. There's a not knowing in this. And that allows, it actually allows what we might call the void of being. And if we take the word void out of it, because that's kind of scary to the self, the void, it's going to swallow me up, this big black hole. But if we just take that word out, although it has some, there's a pointer in that, but let's take that out. If you just relax into, well, we have to use some word. We could say now emptiness of being. Well, that's also a little bit scary. What to call it? But yeah, because it's empty of self. It's empty of grasping. It's empty of avoidance. It's empty of movement. So it's not about the self being still or the self being silent. It's about the end of self, at least in that moment. There's no self in it. And the beauty, and I don't know if I'm running ahead now, but I have to in some ways, is that this is the doorway to the end. It is the end of separation. Because in beingness, in emptiness, we are, if you like, returned to our natural state, which is whole and full and complete. It's both empty and full at the same time. And that's where we no longer feel separate or disconnected. There's nothing to fill up because we're full of the aliveness of being, which expresses itself as life itself, the life that is moving through us. It's not that, if you like, that is the issue. It's the layers that bring us to that appear to be an issue, a problem, an avoidance, a scary place, and so on.
Okay. Let's just take a breather for a second. Because what's actually being talked about is huge. It's huge. It's a life as we know it for most people is predicated on the separate self. The separate self being me alone, moving in the world. And it's not even questioned. It's an assumed reality that we're all in. And in that reality that we take to be real, as separate individuation that we are, innately on the core level, the existential level, and on the human level, I search the world for things to give me a sense of completion. Because what I'm really looking for, if I did but know it, is completion. That all addictions, all grasping for love, all desires, all movements of the mind that you're talking about are actually innately the search for union, the search for completion, the search for wholeness. And if we did but know that as a culture, but as individuals as well, then we might be able to get below that terrible feeling that we have of the existential abandonment that we feel. And we don't, that in that sense, then we don't live in reality. We live in some strange, made up reality that we call normal life. But that normal life is filled with a sense of separation that we're trying to complete. And that's why I say this is huge. That's why I say this is huge, because what you're talking about is simple, the relaxation of the need for the mind to move, or the mind moves, but you're still staying here. But it opens into, doesn't it? Opens into an ocean that many aren't prepared for in a way. That's why usually the spiritual journey happens in degrees, quite honestly. Happens, a little bit at a time, because probably it would overwhelm many human beings and only a few are prepared for it. Am I describing it quite accurately in a way?
I think you are, yes, and very beautifully. Um, as you speak, I was struck by the possibility of how we relate to children and how much of that in conventional society and culture for many, I don't know, thousands of years has reinforced that sense of separation and that sense of not enoughness and that sense of unworthiness, in the sense that almost distraction, doing, having, achieving, and all of that is unconsciously encouraged. And not that children don't have an exuberance that shouldn't be suppressed in any way, but children are much closer to innate beingness, to their natural state of wholeness. And some of these, if you like, unconscious, deeply conditioned ways of relating to children simply pushes them more into separation, or the identification with separation, certainly through schooling and all of that. And I think that if we could be with children from our own deep presence and silence, again, I don't mean verbal silence necessarily, but within, children would attune to that and align to that and innately know that they're absolutely okay as they are. They're enough. They're enough. And well, I certainly know that for myself. As a child, I was more naturally attuned to that. But it wasn't allowed, if you like. It was like, well, you've got to do something, you've got to express yourself, you've got to, yeah, and so on. So, and that's just a minor sort of situation. But for many, they're really pushed the other way. So it just struck me as you were speaking that much of what we see now as the fear of being with oneself and the sense of being a separate self that either has to fight for its survival or get to the top or prove itself to be worthy or prove itself worthy of love or whatever it is a lot of that is very much conditioned and not necessarily inevitable in the human condition.
As you speak, it strikes me in many ways that, for many, not always necessarily, but really when we're born, for those very early pre-verbal, completely unaware of our physical boundary, that's the self. There is no self when we're born. Even if it is this tiny little thing, we're intimately connected with nature, with our naturalness, with the universe. In fact, we're steeped in oneness in effect. It's very, very natural. And as you're speaking, what it reminds me of this relaxation, of the search, of the going into the deepest layers that actually result in awakening or enlightenment or self-realization is actually in many ways as simple as a return to that very, very, very uh, naturalness. We make it complex because the in between bit is where the self that has become so rigidified, almost like a growth that we've talked, as it's become rigidified, something has to happen with that. But if something happens with that, through work, through grace, whatever, then the result is actually a return, not a return backwards, but a remembering or a reconnecting with that very, very
That's right.
naturalness,
Yes, yes,
isn't it?
absolutely, absolutely. It's not a regression. It is a remembrance. And yes, it's that innocence. It's that naturalness. It's that innate oneness that a child is or an infant is not consciously aware of, but our return to it is a conscious return, and that allows us to live in a world of seemingly separate objects, because that's how we function and have to function, but from a very different paradigm where we are no longer isolated, we are no longer alienated, whether we're alone or whether we're with people, friends, loved ones, whether we're, surrounded by 1,000 people. We're still not disconnected. Yeah. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter because we're not seeking connection in order to fill something that cannot be fulfilled in that way, that's already fulfilled, but we don't know it. Yeah. So yes, it's radically a different dimension of being.
So let me just, because I want to continue this a little bit, and I just want to get into, because it's, we've painted excuse me, a glorious picture in many ways, and it's, yeah, so the relaxation, etc., etc. But I want to talk just a little bit about what the move you said about the movement, seeing the movement of mind. And I want to just get into that a little bit more, because when you say see the movement of mind, to a lot of people, they that it doesn't, they don't know in many ways what that means. I want to talk about how the movement of mind, is that the movement of self? Is that the movement of what mind is that? And what's the benefit, or how is that seen? Because for most people, I am the mind. The mind is me. This is the me. So what's gonna be invited here? What's gonna come undone? What happens when we see the mind? What do we do about that?
Well, one has to start somewhere, if you like. And that starting place is usually when one sees for oneself, whatever circumstance or however your life is, one sees for oneself how one is tortured or tormented by mind, just thinking mind, thought activity.
Okay,
That's the
just
only mind.
thoughts.
We're just talking about thought activity. Yes,
Okay.
mind in itself is a wonderful function,
Okay.
one that we shouldn't try to get rid of. That's a slightly different conversation, but
Yes.
in this sense, the movement of mind is simply the thought activity that takes place. So, for most people, or for many people, I should say, there is such an entrancement with thought activity that it's like the self is enmeshed in thought activity or identified with it, my thoughts, and then usually there's an attempt to, well, either it's so enmeshed that there's no clear seeing at all, or that enmeshment brings one to the place where, well, I only want to have positive thoughts or happy thoughts or peaceful thoughts because the other ones are tormenting me and I don't like them, and rightly so. So that would either bring someone to meditation practice or some kind of presence practice. Sometimes that's positive thinking practice, but that doesn't work either. um, but something opens the door to attempting to or seeing the gap between thoughts and so on. So attempting to find peace, if you like. But that in itself is not enough, because that's still drawing one's identity from thought activity. So at some point it has to go deeper than that. And that is the realization or the recognition or the willingness to not follow the movement of mind. In other words, to not follow thought activity. To realize, and this is the much deeper spiritual journey, if you like. Well, you don't have to call it spiritual, but inner journey, which is to not try and stop thought activity, because it's just flotsam and jetsam that is in the field and is going to continue anyway. Some of it has to do with kind of grooves or patterns that we've got into with thought activity, and some of it isn't actually ours. But to see that thoughts are sometimes positive, they're sometimes negative, they're sometimes happy thoughts, they're sometimes unhappy thoughts. And therefore, to try and hold on to one and get rid of the other it's like grasping sand. It's just gonna, you can't, yes, yeah. But to realize that it's not the thoughts themselves that are the problem. It's the following those thoughts that is the problem. What does that mean? It means there's actually something beyond thought, and that's awareness. Most people think those two things are synonymous, that awareness is a kind of function of thought, but it's not. So awareness follows thought. In other words, you get, on a very basic level, you give attention to thought activity. But if you don't give attention to it, if you don't follow that thought, then there's initially a kind of unmeshing of, or disentangling of self, which is awareness, from thought. And that gives a spaciousness. Yeah. From there, we go into a deeper inquiry, but I would say that's the, if you like, starting place.
Is awareness here now for everybody who's watching or listening?
I hope so. Yes. Awareness is all there is. Is it not true? Whoever's listening right now, is it not true that you are aware in this moment as you listen to these words, these sounds, or these visuals, as there is thought activity arising? Maybe you agree or you disagree, or you like or you don't like, or whatever is arising. Is it not true that there is something that you can call awareness, that is aware of all of that, the content of your experience? Is it not true? Otherwise, there'd be no experience. So that's kind of the first initial realization. It's fundamental.
Well,
Ultimately, this is the question, who am I? But if we not phrase it in that way, because that gets confused in the mind and also has a very spiritual kind of lineage to it. But if you just ask yourself, is it not true that awareness is here? Something, someone, yeah, is aware of what I'm experiencing, what is being experienced. Now, instead of seeing it as I am aware, just notice the fact of awareness. It's here. And then whatever is being experienced, which I call the scenery, is it not true that it's constantly fluctuating? Whether it's thought or perception or sensation, it's forever fluctuating, like the ripples on the surface of water, the ocean, the pool, the river. But awareness is always here. And that awareness doesn't change. The awareness of something changes, but awareness itself doesn't change. It's like a light bulb may go off.
yeah.
It's a question, if you like, or yeah, or a seeing that many people are not, if you like, ask or contemplating.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, sometimes or quite often we're looking for it somewhere else, busy on the path looking for the answer or the solution somewhere else. But actually, it's here right now. Everybody who's listening and everybody who's watching, you and me, are all experiencing, or not even experiencing, but are rooted in somehow that awareness. It's not my awareness, it's not your awareness, it doesn't belong to anybody. It's the ground of being, which we can call awareness.
And
Yeah,
that is that awareness, as you just said, is the same.
it's the same.
It's the same. It's not my awareness or your awareness, although it comes through this vehicle. So then I can say, I'm aware of this and that and this and that. But the nature of awareness, the fact of awareness, is unchanging, unmoving, and its nature is essentially the same in all individuations. Whatever the experience is, the experience may be different, the content may be different, but awareness is the same. Again, that's a light bulb, possibly, because it's in that we are all one. It's all one. It's not separate awarenesses. It's the same awareness, and it has no boundary, it has no edge. It just appears to be separate because I think of myself as this mind, this body, and so on. But it's the same. That's the place that we, if you like, know oneness. It can't be found anywhere else. That's the space. And in realizing that more and more, as it filters into our experience, we no longer feel separate in that sense. Functionally, yes. But on the deepest existential level, there's no separation. And therefore, there can be no loneliness, there can be no aloneness in the conventional sense.
Awareness is that, to me, speaking poetically, is the garden. There's a garden, and everything and all these individual flowers that we call ourselves are all growing in it. And the garden and the flowers are not separate from each other, but we've assumed that as the little flowers, we're all separate from each other, looking out across the garden, and we don't realize that the garden is the same garden.
And Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is already here, but you do not have
Have
eyes
eyes
to
to
see.
see.
And that's what that means. The kingdom of heaven is the unified field of beingness. Yeah, we use the word being or awareness interchangeably. It's the unified field. That's the only place of peace and oneness, yeah, and true fulfillment. But you do not have eyes to see because we're looking the wrong way. We're looking for the kingdom of heaven in the things that we have,
Yeah.
in the things that we do, in the things that we achieve, in our various identities as this, that, and the other. Yeah. We're looking for love in the wrong
Oh
place
man.
and so on. Here it is. This is the
See,
true
it's,
treasure. This is the true garden. This is the
yes.
true kingdom.
So the mind is and the self is always moving outwards to find its completion. Is always looking,
That's why
always searching
don't
outwards. Don't
follow that
follow
search.
it.
Don't follow that search. Yeah. It's from here that all the riches that you need, if you like, that are truly yours will come to be, whatever those
And
riches are.
this is so beautiful because in many ways it's so simple, to see, to recognize, as we said, that awareness is here now. And then it sees the movement of the mind, the thought activity. And there it is, just for this moment. That's all it needs, just this moment. Don't try and prolong it, because you try and prolong it and it is gone. Yeah, and thought will come back because we're habituated to the thought patterns that go round and round. By and by, with enough turning towards the awareness, giving that allegiance, that devotion, by and by the movement of mind becomes less concerning.
Mm. Becomes less concerning. It actually also becomes less visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a movement of a whisper, let's call it a whisper that moves.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same substance.
Well, yes, I think because the flower that we are has stopped being so neurotic about itself, because what it thought was its terrible loneliness has been realized as its great all oneness, or whatever, the great union of things. So do you think we've given for this session, this podcast, an opening?
I
It's
think it's a very beautiful
by no means
conversation we've
complete,
had.
but I think,
I think that's a very lovely place to end for today.
yeah,
Yeah. The realization or the possibility of the remembrance that the kingdom of heaven is here, in you, as you. The doorway is in you.
I think this is the potential for this in many ways we realize is that, so many of our troubles that we fixate on, so many of our wounds, our traumas, our troubles, our grievances, we get caught up in the fixing mentality, and there's a place and a time for all of that. But also there's a great healing, which I think you were talking about right at the beginning. There's a great healing in knowing this, knowing the unbroken, and go back to,
There's a sort of innate intelligence in our natural state that doesn't come from thinking mind, but simply from the invisible field of beingness from which and through which life moves and unfolds. There's such an innate intelligence in that, but when we touch it or rest in it or abide in it or live from it, then all unresolved emotions and feelings and will be metabolized in that we don't have to keep on trying to fix ourselves, although support on the way is part of the human journey. But I'm talking about at this deepest level, when we truly sink into it, that's the true place of healing. It's also the true place of well-being on all levels, emotional well-being and physical well-being, because there's no separation in that dimension. And if there's no separation, then the whole system functions organically and holistically, the need to attend to symptoms, whether they're psychological or physical symptoms, essentially comes from a separatist paradigm. I'm not talking about just ignoring what needs to be tended to, but this sinking into our natural, innate, whole state, unified beingness is actually fundamental to true well-being. And this is something that is also completely denied or ignored in conventional medicine or practices. I'm not talking just about physical healing, but on all levels, psychological healing too.
Well, yes, we operate from fragmented consciousness, and we have already separated off into mind, emotion, body, spirit, and all that sort of nonsense, really. And so we tend to operate from the neurotic self or the fragmented self. So when something goes wrong, then we kind of want to fix it or see it as a problem, and we don't listen to, and we're not aware of what you're talking about, which you talk about as natural intelligence. I do think there's value at some point, I'm not saying when, of actually opening some of that up to speak a little bit more to what natural intelligence might mean to you. But we'll save that for a different podcast. Maybe not. But I think that's a very intriguing place to draw this podcast to a close. I think we've explored some of the problems, some of the loneliness, and I think we've invited a deeper seeing, I hope, a deeper awareness that there's a possibility of letting go of some of that and coming into a deeper state of union and well-being and love. Back into the garden, everyone. Okay, Amoda, it's very good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. It's good to be back, and hopefully we won't be as long before we do another one. If you're listening to this, please, I don't know, share it or find us somewhere. The juice for us is in the in-person retreats and offerings that we offer, where we meet in physical form, and deep transformation is possible, where we explore this and many other kind of fundamental aspects of what it means to be walking a spiritual path in this world. And they're very beautiful, and so the invitation is to come to those. And if you can't make it to those, come to our public meetings online, come to our events. Yeah, or follow us on YouTube, follow Amoda on YouTube. You can also find me on YouTube. We're all over the place in many ways, and we look forward to meeting you and seeing you somewhere in some way, shape or form. Amoda Maa, thank you very much for your wisdom and grace, as always. Namaste, everyone. Take care,
Namaste.
and we'll see you soon. Namaste.